Welcome to the Jeff Ball Show.
Welcome to the Jeff Ball Show.
Welcome to the Jeff Ball Show.
Welcome to Jeff Ball Show.
Welcome to the Jeff Ball Show.
Welcome to the Jeff Ball Show.
Welcome to the Jeff Ball Show.
Jeff, a serial entrepreneur, has founded and sold over 20 businesses, including one for over $30 million.
With a proven track record of success, he's directly employed over 500 people and is revered as
One of the most influential entrepreneurs of our generation.
Follow Jeff's life live as he builds his next business in real time
And introduces you to other inspiring creators and leaders along the way.
Essentially, my trade is started working with couples doing relationship coaching, and then I got into personal growth coaching because I just started attracting more specifically women rather than couples, and women who have gone through divorce, which is what I've been through. And you know, it took time, but over time, years and time, just sort of really coming down into a niche of working with women who have gone through divorce.
So is this like a 10-year journey that you've been doing this, or is this recent?
Almost 7 years in.
7?
Yeah.
And did you go through a divorce yourself or something? Is that kind of what you...
About 7 years ago. So, and when he left me. But when he left, I had already done my first bit of my coaching training, like level 1 of life coaching training. So I was already, even before it happened, on this path, but it definitely, it definitely played into a lot of what I was talking about, leaning towards. And I think when you go through anything, it can't help but sort of shape your experience moving forward and who you attract into your life and your business.
Sure. So is that like when you say you took a course on to start your business, the life coach training, what is that? Is there like multiple people that teach that, or is it like a specific course, like a Tony Robbins type course, or is it?
I think now there's got to be probably hundreds, if not thousands of different ones, right? How it worked for me is I had a friend I did my undergrad like almost 30 years ago at UVic in psychology.
There's a ton of people here that went to UVic.
Oh, really?
Like everybody we interview seems like they went to UVic.
Oh, it's awesome. It's a great university. But yeah, I did my undergrad there in psychology, and at the time my path was going to be to go through and do my master's in counseling. It didn't work out that way, and I ended up going down a path, and I've been a registered massage therapist for the past 20 years. And when throughout that 20 years of massaging, probably 3 or 4 times I'd sent out for information at, for different, not universities, because I was quite set on not wanting to go back to university at that point, but like diploma programs and this and that for counseling or therapy or different things like that.
Okay, let's stop there just for a second, because I want to dig into that part of it.
Okay.
So it sounds like you've always kind of been a coach or a counselor. You've always kind of wanted to do that.
Yeah.
It almost seems like it's like kind of your calling kind of thing.
100%.
And but it's interesting because the massage therapy, I just got back from Scottsdale, Arizona, and
I'm going there next week.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
I love that place.
Me too.
But there was some dude there that did massage therapy, but it was, I forget what it was called, walking massage or something, where he puts his heels on your back and stuff.
Oh my gosh.
And he's like, I'm also a life coach therapist kind of thing. And he warned me before he did this. I signed up for this like 3-course kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it was this walking massage thing was really deep tissue, like really intense. And then yoga, and then some other kind of like life coach type thing. And he's like, before I do this walking therapy, I just want to let you know that like it's going to release some emotions kind of thing. I'm like the typical dude, kind of like, oh, whatever. Yeah, I just want a massage, stand up a little straighter kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was interesting because the massage therapy and this deep yoga thing that he had I don't know if it's his girlfriend or just another coach, but it seemed like they had a close relationship. Both of those things were like releasing like emotions in my muscles. I was like, oh, that's interesting. So when you said that, you're kind of like, oh, I'm a massage therapist and then coaching. I was like, oh, it's interesting that those are starting to almost be related, like professions in a way.
Well, and that's what, obviously there's boundaries and you got to read the room. But when asked what I loved most about massage, it was not the massage. I loved connecting with people.
Yeah.
And that's always been sort of what I enjoy, and what lights me up the most is actually having that connection with someone,
Sure.
right?
Okay, so you went to UVic, you got your psychology degree, you're kind of working in massage, and you probably at this point know you want to be a counselor. You've kind of been doing that kind of thing.
Looking into it, and then I ran into an old friend, and she said she was doing life coaching, and that was, again, this was about 8 years ago.
Okay.
I'd never heard of it. What is it? She told me the program she did, and it was one of those things where it was like, I'm somebody who always believes it's either a hell yes or it's a no.
Yeah.
And it was just like instantaneous. Okay, this is the program. This is what I was meant to do.
Sure. So let's touch on that then. What
Yeah.
is it? Like I kind of know what it is. Like I've taken Tony Robbins, a few of those little things. Like maybe we should define what life coaching is. I don't think a lot of people know.
It's so interesting because even when I was doing the training, and I would ask all the time, I wanted to know, okay, I wanted to be able to really clearly understand what's the difference between counseling, therapy, life coaching.
Yeah, I don't know what the difference there is.
And I think the easiest way to define it, and it's pretty textbook, but it's, obviously the amount of training is different. But also when you go into therapy or counseling, you tend to, this is a very broad definition, but you take where you are now and they'll often look back in your past to see how you got there.
Okay.
Super helpful. Like I'm a full fan of counseling and therapy and all the modalities, but with coaching, when we tend to go into where you are right now and where do you want to be. And I specifically believe in sort of action oriented coaching. So like giving you, like, we can talk about everything that's going wrong, and I think that that's super important and valid. But more than that, I want to give you steps and action steps that you can take so that you're not just talking about what you want to change, that you're actually given some tools so that you can leave from a session and make an actual tangible shift in your life.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you're a life coach.
Yeah.
And like we're definitely going to dive deep into that. I
Yeah.
think that's really interesting for the listeners. But also we're like at the first part of our show, we like to talk about the entrepreneurial aspect a little bit. So you're a life coach. Like how do you get clients? Like how do you market yourself?
Yeah.
Like what's that process like? Were you nervous when you first started out to get clients? What was it like to get your first client and how did you get them? Like
It's
tell us a little,
it's
little bit about
terrifying because for massage, especially here in BC, in Canada, it's an easy business to me comparatively, especially now that I have something to compare it to. You go into massage, it's not hard. It's not a hard sell because so many people have extended health benefits
Sure.
and it's covered. Whereas when you're starting a business and running a business on your own from the ground up, like a coaching business, it's entirely based on marketing, advertising, who you know, and getting the word out, right? And obviously now in today's world, it used to be phone books and newspapers and things. And also I would have been probably much more confined to working like just with people in my location, like just here in Kelowna. Whereas now with the internet and social media, so I dove in from the very beginning with marketing on Instagram.
Okay.
And I think I primarily Instagram, a bit on Facebook, but I really do focus Instagram. And I think it was just a preference.
Okay.
And I just haven't given up. I've just gone for it.
Sure. And your Instagram is like pretty impressive, actually. You got
Thank
like
you.
quite a few organic followers and all that. Are you doing paid ads on Instagram? Are you using organic or what are you doing?
Over the years, I never did anything paid.
Okay.
Up until more recently, I have worked with a marketing company that helps me, and they've made some ads and run some ads for me. But I've also, to be honest, I'm not an expert, and this is something that I'm still working on and learning, but I boost posts or ads or like slides or stories on Instagram. And that seems to help too.
Okay.
It's, again, I don't want to say I'm an expert in that area. I think it's it takes a lot of time and really studying your analytics as to what is actually working and what the purpose of it is. I do know for me personally, it's worked really well for gaining followers.
Okay.
So you could look at it as, yes, you're paying money, but
get
you're
the
getting some more
social
followers.
proof.
Whether that translate into actual paying customers, clients of mine into my programs, I think it's starting to work. I've learned a lot about, building funnels and how to do it properly. But again, it has been a work in progress over 7 years.
Yeah. So you've been doing that for 7 years now. Yeah. Okay. So you're on Instagram, you're advertising. Do most of your clients come from Instagram at this point, or half and half, or where are most of your people coming from?
I would say 90% from Instagram.
And do you reach out directly ever to anybody? Like, do you ever DM anybody, or is it mostly you let them come to you? Or
I mostly let them come to me. I've tried that a little bit. Again, probably a couple years ago, I did a little trial and error with that. I personally didn't have success with it, but I have heard for others. Again, I think there's a lot of, different variants that can really determine what works for you, what works for, or like is effective with your certain following.
Sure. Yeah.
The most success I've had is through, knowing how to run a proper funnel.
Okay.
And actually, having, say, a high ticket item. So for me, it's like a high ticket group program that I sell. It's a 9-week program. But then having sort of the layers that come down, it's starting with something free and it gets them into that funnel, and then maybe something that's a lower ticket item.
Okay.
And then so you're working them up into the big ticket sale, but in that process, they're learning who you are, because in that freebie that you offer that maybe they sign up for, they might be green and brand new to you. So you're building trust. They're getting to know who you are.
Yeah.
All of that. So it takes time, but at the same time, through that process, whether it be through emails, like your email list, and getting to know you on social media and having those conversations, and through DMing once maybe you've built a relationship with them, because then it's not just like a cold call, right? I think that is becoming the most effective way that I have found thus far.
Sure. Are you comfortable with talking about the prices a little bit, or?
Yeah, absolutely.
So for your 8-week program, like roughly what's that cost? And then what are the other steps, and what are those price points? And then probably most importantly, like, how do you even come up with a price? Because that's an interesting thing to like be like, well, what is this worth to people? And and life coaching, it's like there's a wide range in life coaching. There's like Tony Robbins, some of his courses, I don't know, like I imagine $50,000-$100,000, and
exactly. And there is a range. And that's the thing is, and I remember very early on in my journey asking one of my business coaches at the time, like, what do I charge? And it really, I believe, sort of takes time in building your confidence around what you charge, because unless I can say it confidently and believe I'm worth what I'm charging, it's not going to sell. I think whether you believe in energy or not, but energetically, people feel it, like, and so you have to be confident being able to say it out loud and actually sell it, right? So it was for me a very gradual process of upping my prices over a period of 7 years.
Sure.
And I've had different business coaches. My current business coach, when we designed this 9-week program I have for women who've gone through divorce, it's like a healing program, right? And it's for attracting new love into their lives. These are tools I've been building and using for 7 years. I'm super confident in the program. How she helped me was to really put it together in a really aesthetically beautiful way that made sense, and to like really set it up. She actually did it all on AI. That's a whole nother conversation, but it's not all on AI, but it's
a lot of it.
Really cool what you can do now. But she said, this is a $3,000 program. And I remember, because I think up till that point, it's funny how quickly you forget. I don't think I'd charged anything over $1,200.
Okay.
So at least for like a 9-week program. And it was like, oh gosh, I'm going to have to say that out loud. And so it was the first time I offered it. And I thought this was brilliant, was rather than saying, like, here's my offer, my pitch, it's $3,000, join me. I said, it's a $3,000 program, but because this is my beta run, the first time running this program, you're going to get it for 50% off, but this is only happening once.
Sure.
So it allowed me that time to be able to say it out loud, but then to offer this massive discount.
Okay.
And kind of give the incentive. And then the next time I offered it, I did it for $2,000. So I allowed myself the time. I continually said, this is a $3,000 program. Yeah. But because I'm really working out the kinks, like I used language that, like This is my second time running it. I'm still offering a huge discount. You're going to get it for this much, but this is the last time, until I truly felt comfortable putting it out there. So my high ticket offer for the 9-week program is $3,000, which I can very confidently say now.
Yeah.
Because I know everything that's included in that, and I know its value and what people get out of it.
Sure.
But that was not like it's hard. I remember at first, because I said to her, oh, you're going to make me charge $3,000, aren't you?
Yeah.
Which, I mean, of course that's what I want.
Yeah.
But it's hard at first.
It's interesting how it's hard to get to like that. What is most likely a fair price. It's, you know, most people, I think one of the biggest errors people make when they first start out is they don't like feel comfortable charging enough. You know, they're like, and some of it is, I think they actually don't like do the math that it's like, oh, stuff is actually expensive, like all the labor that you have to put in.
And how much time you've put into it.
The advertising, all that kind of stuff is expensive. And I feel like, especially the new group of entrepreneurs coming up, I'm like, you got to up your price a little bit. Like people are willing to pay if the value's there, kind of thing. So
yeah, and I think honestly, I think business, at least I could speak for myself, is such a great way to actually lean into your own self-confidence, because it really does have a lot to do with your self-worth of what you're putting out there, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
But you said you don't market the 9-week program right away. You market something at a smaller price point. So what is that price point, and what are you selling at that price point?
Well, usually I'll offer something free first. I'm kind of in the midst of doing a few different things. I now have a free quiz that people can take.
Yeah,
so that's
brilliant.
one way. And I've had other free, like smaller, I don't want to call it a master class, but like a workshop-y kind of pre-recorded that it's no energy for me, or it's a download, the PDF that they can get. But it's something for free that they can get. It gets them onto my email list.
Sure.
So then they're also, again, we're building trust. They're given through the emails are starting to get to know what I'm about, what I do, and that builds trust and knowing my brand, right?
Sure. And this was it 8 weeks, did you say, or 9 weeks?
9-week course,
weeks.
yeah.
9 weeks. Why 9 weeks and not 8 weeks?
You know what? No,
is that just how long it takes?
Because I had 9 modules.
Oh, okay.
And it's just funny, like, because looking back, I've many times, you're not the first person that I thought, I don't know why 9 weeks. It just is. But yeah, it was more to do with the actual modules that I think were, like, when I came up with what I think are the most important steps for healing in a holistic way through, you know, the trauma or the pain of divorce, to be able to get to a healthy place where you are attracting what is aligned for you. There are 9 key components. So it just sort of made it.
And just to clarify, you're a massage therapist and a counselor, and you took psychology and everything, and then you went through this divorce, and you had these emotional experiences and these tough times that you had to get through, and you found that there were kind of 9 issues that you kind of had to get through. You got through those issues, and now you're selling a program that's teaching other people a little easier or quicker or better way to get through those issues. Is that essentially what it is?
Well, I did the life coaching program. The other part that we didn't talk about is I then went and did my Gottman training. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Gottman Institute.
No.
So John and Julie Gottman are a couple out of Seattle, and they're quite well known in the relationship world.
Okay.
And the story for me goes is my ex-husband and I, our therapist that we had for 15 years, was a Gottman trained therapist. I was very familiar from the work I'd done through my own counseling with the Gottman method. And so I got very curious about it. And then when I had already started my life coaching, when my marriage ended, and it got me thinking that maybe I'd like to work with couples or divorce, or because this is something I feel very strong to, I can relate to.
Sure.
So I started looking into the Gottman Institute and how I could get certified, and found out that you actually don't need to be a therapist or a psychologist or psychotherapist to be able to take their courses. So I did levels 1 and 2 of the Gottman training to get certified with their method. So when I first started, I was really focused on couples therapy through what I had learned through the Gottman Institute.
Okay.
I've taken a lot of that and kind of made it my own, but also into how it's really shaped a lot of what I believe in relationships, about relationships, what makes relationships work. And also through my own experiences and what I've learned through the coaching training, what I think is really helpful for people to work through when they've gone through divorce. Because I could see it firsthand. There's resentment, there's anger, sadness, so much grief, and then fear around the future.
Yeah.
And all of these things that come up for people that I don't know, there's a lot of people talking about. There is quite a stigma around divorce, even still. Like 50% of all marriages end in divorce, which is staggering statistically. Like when you think about that when you're getting married, it's not many last, right? And so when you think about it, half of us really are divorced if we've been married. So many of us are in this position, but it's really still kind of got this cloud over it as it's a really negative time in people's lives.
Did you say you did couples counseling or you studied couples counseling? Both. So
I did it with my ex, and we still ended up getting divorced, which is a whole nother story. But then moving forward, I decided I wanted to get my training. Yeah.
And does couples therapy work typically, or what? Tell us some of the issues that you find in couples therapy.
Yeah.
Do you know right away if somebody's going to make it? Like, is it a little secret that you kind of have?
I did couples therapy for a while with, or couples coaching, I'll call it, because I'm not a therapist, but I did the training for it. But I don't do work with couples as much anymore. I found it really tough because, quite honestly, you can sometimes be in a really tricky position of more moderating fights than you are like being able to really help someone. Yeah. I do love giving couples the tools that help relationships. And I do believe I believe that no matter how bad the relationship feels in the moment, that if you have two people that are willing to put in some work, that they can make it last if they want to. But you need two people who are willing to self-reflect and willing to try new things and that kind of thing.
So what are a couple of the tools? Like, what are are there a couple big sledgehammers where it's like, if you get these few done, then you're usually good? Or
communication, which that's pretty broad, but I think really, like, I call it the weekly check-in. Gottman, I've sort of taken things and made them my own, but I call it the weekly check-in. I think they call it I can't remember. Doesn't matter, but it's around scheduling a time every week where you talk about your relationship. So it's not to talk about the schedule or the kids or whatever. It's to talk about how are things going. It's meant to be, whether it's a 5-minute conversation, 10 minutes, or an hour, but it's meant to be a no-fight zone where you each get your opportunity to say what's on your mind, but to be able to say, like, this is what I'm finding really hard. This isn't working for me. And then equally to say, but I've seen these changes and I really appreciate what you're doing here. And then to be able to receive it back. Because as you can imagine, so often what happens with couples over time is distance builds. As there's maybe it's time's happening, you've got kids now, you're getting busy, there's distance, you're not talking as much, maybe a bit of resentment has built, and there's not the connection that there used to be, whether it's intimately or otherwise, and you're just not talking anymore, and there's these resentments building and building and building, and then when they actually get faced, it's like a huge explosion.
So let's stop there just for a second and get real granular on that.
Yeah.
So you can say, let's talk once a week and we'll talk about the actual relationship. What's the physical environment like, and do you put that on a planner or a calendar, and is that supposed to be like at a dinner somewhere, or is it supposed to be like just on your couch? Like, how do you schedule that? Because saying schedule it and then actually doing it.
And I talk with the clients all the time about this. I'm like, it's going to feel forced. It's going to feel awkward. And I want you to do it anyways, because this is how you will change the dynamics of your marriage. You have to make it a priority, right? So I know friends of mine who do follow, they don't work with me, but they're the Gottman method, but same thing. They get up at 5 a.m. every Tuesday and sit before the kids get up, because it's the time that they're not interrupted, and that's their time to have this conversation because their relationship matters to them.
Yeah.
And so it's putting it in a calendar, deciding what is the best day. Usually for most people, it's like the same time every week, if that works, it just makes it a habit. I know my old therapist who originally taught me about this he said for the past like 30 years, him and his wife, all the friends know, everybody knows Friday nights are their night because they do their talk, but then they afterwards go out on a date night.
Yeah.
So they've like blocked off time on their calendar for their relationship. And I do think that that's what it takes. I mean, I think having these conversations, specifically like difficult conversations, like if I always say, if you're finding yourself avoiding something, you know there's something that's on your mind, but you don't want to talk about it because you're afraid it'll cause a fight, or you're just tiptoeing around it because you just don't want to have that conversation. Those are the ones you need to have.
Like I have that quite often, but I have to admit, for me, it takes me like a half an hour to warm up to that conversation kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if I could do it in 5 or 10 minutes.
But that's the thing is, I think if it's planned, and if you had somebody, like say your wife came to you and said, hey, I talked to this coach and this, or I listened to her on Instagram or on the podcast, and she says that you've got to schedule it in, and you can have, and I say 5 minutes. In the beginning, it might take longer because
like
you're going to
2
have
hours
you're going to have maybe more to talk about. But what you'll find, and this is the reason it works, over time, because you're regularly talking about the problems and the hard stuff, and you're getting open and honest with each other, the big stuff seems to sort of dissipate, and then eventually over time it's like, no, things are going really good. And then really what those times are for are to say, like, I'm really grateful for you. Like, look what we've built together.
It's interesting that gratitude often is like the root of a lot of problems sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay, so number one was, you're like, if you're a couples therapist, you've done this, those weekly check-ins, schedule it, make it a routine thing every Monday or every Tuesday. What's another one? What's another one of the big ones?
Taking a timeout, I think, is a big one. I think if you're a couple that has conflict, I mean, this is another misconception. Conflict is normal. I believe actually conflict can bring you closer together if you know how to do it in a healthy way. But it's when the conflicts are going sideways, or someone's leaving every time there's a fight, like, peace out, I'm done. And you feel like that can trigger people, or if it's getting louder and escalating, to be able to take a time out and to be able to have a statement that you have set ahead of time, right? So that it's like, when this happens, so to be able to talk about it ahead of time, going, okay, when we're in a fight and if things are going sideways, I'm going to say I need a break. And when we say I need a break, or maybe it's a code word, like when I say pumpkin, it means I need a break, and let's take half an hour. And we will both know and trust in each other that we will come back because it matters to us. It's an important conversation, but that we need to bring our heart rate back down.
Sure. A safe word kind of thing. Yeah.
So that you can go, and then the key is to go for half an hour minimum and not stew, not phone your mom and tell her all the things your partner did wrong, or phone your friend. It's not about stewing and proving you're right. It's about getting your mind off of it. And they call it self-soothing, right?
Sure.
So bringing your heart rate back down so that you're de-escalating. Because when your heart rate's over 100 beats per minute, we're in fight or flight response. The blood's no longer going to our brain, it's going to our muscles, and we don't think straight. So when you think about fights, usually our heart rates are up, we're angry, and all the, like, I can speak for myself, the stupid things I've said before in arguments, that it's just because I'm out of my mind. Like, I'm so mad, but I'm not thinking straight anymore.
Sure.
So you can almost guarantee that nothing good is going to happen, right?
Yeah. Do you ever recommend, like, doing a separation before a divorce when you say take a break?
Take a break. Well, usually taking a break is just taking a break from the conversation. I haven't recommended separation to people other than, and I primarily work with individuals now rather than couples. I've often worked with specifically women who are considering whether they want to stay or go in a relationship.
And what's the question? Is there a big question or two that you have them, like, picture your life in 5 years, or how do you know how to advise them?
It's interesting because usually just in the first conversation with somebody, I know what they want.
I knew it. I knew you knew right away.
You just know they're scared.
Yeah. Do you tell them right away what you think, or do you?
No, I see. It's not up for me to decide,
Yeah.
right? It's up to me to help them gain clarity on what they already know.
Sure.
And sometimes even just saying, like to have somebody safe, like a coach or somebody that you trust, to be able, and when they say to you, what do you really want? Usually they already know.
How common is it for people to get a divorce or something and then regret it in 5 or 10 years? Do you run into that much?
I haven't.
No.
No, I haven't. I haven't at all heard it, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen.
Sure.
But yeah, no, I haven't heard of it at all. I think, if anything, and this again, it sounds like I'm pumping up divorce. I'm not. I just think that there is a lot of silver linings to divorce that doesn't get talked about. But I think more often than not, people stay too long.
Yeah. I actually heard that the other day. I was listening to some podcast and the guy was saying the reason that people get divorced and then the next time they're more likely to get divorced again isn't because that person's like not good. It's just they just know more that they can get divorced and be like better off kind of thing. So I thought, oh, that's interesting.
I think we live in a really interesting time. I think, reality is, I don't know, decades ago, right? Divorce was very taboo.
Yeah.
Whether it be because of religion or whatever we were taught. But I think now we're starting to see that our happiness matters as well. Also, women before didn't feel safe to leave. Not be like, well, maybe not physically, but it's more just maybe financially because less women were working outside the home.
Sure. Yeah.
Whereas now women are equally able to support themselves. So I think that it is becoming different reasons that people are choosing divorce and understanding that slowly but surely that it's not necessarily the worst thing that can happen. I don't think any of us go into marriage thinking I want to get divorced. Was definitely not my goal.
Do you think when people do get divorced, it's because they change over time, or do you think it's just a rottenness of the relationship, or why do you think it eventually happens for 50% of people? I'm always curious, like, were they a good match at the beginning and then 10 or 20 years passed and now they're not a good match anymore?
It could be. I think too, I mean, when you think about us as people and you think about who you were 20 years ago, I definitely was not the same person I am now. And I think what happens sometimes too is we all grow, well, hopefully, and change, sometimes at different rates, sometimes in different ways. And so if a couple, even if they were really well matched in the beginning, but they're growing and learning and changing in ways that aren't on the same path anymore, it can just mean it doesn't have to be that one's right and one's wrong or one's bad and one's good. It's more just maybe we're just on different paths now.
Do you ever notice when couples come and talk to you that one couple's kind of like given up and the other hasn't? Is that common to see?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, like I said, I usually work with one person in the relationship. And now even more than ever, I'm working with women that have already gone through the divorce. But I think that's when it's usually destined. And I think that is for divorce. That's usually like the marker is unless you have two people that genuinely love each other, like that want to make it work, because you have to be willing to own your stuff and to shift into change. And, there's certain behaviors like, having those difficult conversations and communicating regularly and being willing to hear each other and actually listen and all of these kind of traits of healthy couples. And it's when those show up, I think all relationships can work, but you have to have two people willing to try and get there,
Have you ever had a couple come in and you're counseling them and in your mind at first you're kind of like, oh, this person really wants it to work and that person I'm not so sure of. Have you ever seen that reverse where you got the one person on board kind of and started to see some effort start to take place, or is it kind of set in stone a little bit?
Usually, from my perspective, you can tell quite early on, but that's just the experiences I've had. It's not to say it doesn't happen, but quite often it's sort of the same as how I was saying when someone's asking me if they should stay or go in a relationship or a marriage. Usually from the get-go, they know individually that they want to be in the marriage or they don't. And I think whether or not someone's being transparent and honest, like and open about them really wanting the relationship to work or not. A lot of times they want it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I want this. I want this. But I think when it really comes down to it, I think sometimes they've already checked out a bit, you know?
Sure. So now I'm going to ask the same question, but let's interpret it in a different way. When somebody comes into your office, they're a couple. Do you ever have one person give up and let's interpret it this time as meaning like one person like maybe loses their job and starts just sitting on the couch and playing video games? And does that often lead to a divorce, or is that more permissible? Or what is like, how would that, if you have like, you both get together, you're both fit, you're both healthy, you both have jobs, one person all of a sudden is not so fit anymore and maybe loses their job or gets a demotion, and does that cause divorce, or is that just more of a tension in the divorce as compared to, let's say, maybe like infidelity or something? Like, can we talk about like that group of problems?
I think that it sort of comes back to the path, right? And when you get married, you may hopefully be on sort of matching paths and the same trajectory, and then one person veers off while the other person is maybe still working hard. And again, unless they have the communication skills and the ability to like have healthy conflict, right? Because resentment builds, the dynamics of the marriage change. Usually that ends up also causing some intimacy problems in the bedroom because, you know, when there's conflict, it kind of goes hand in hand. It's like there's lots of dynamics that change there. So it definitely is a recipe unless they are equipped with knowing how to talk about it and both of them are willing to work at it.
Yeah.
But if someone's complacent, chances are I would say the relationship could go down a sideways path. Maybe it doesn't end, but maybe it's an unhealthy relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, because 50% of people get divorced, but of the 50% that stay married, I wonder what the percentage is that's like,
I wonder how many are actually happy. Yeah. And that's the thing about the past. Like when I think about my parents' generation and things, I think about how many couples stayed together, but they were miserable because I don't think that that's anything better. I mean, we could say, well, this is terrible that our divorce rate is rising and that it's gotten as high as it is. Well, yeah, maybe. But maybe the positive in it is actually people are taking their own happiness into account and choosing to live a happier life and more fulfilling life. Like I always come back to that idea of how do I want to feel on my deathbed? How do I want to look back on my life? What regrets do I want to have? Because if I stayed in a marriage just for the sake of not getting divorced, I'm pretty sure that'd be a regret, right? I'd rather do what it took. And I think the reason a lot of people stay, like you said, is really just the fear of the unknown. And that's what I work with a lot is, you know, women who are terrified because they thought they had their whole life like planned out. Men too, right? I thought I knew who I was going to grow old with. We had our retirement fund. We had all this, we had all that. And now it's gone. Will I ever find someone again? Am I going to be on my own forever? How am I going to manage financially? Like, where am I going to live? Like, there's all of these question marks. It's terrifying. So for that reason, a lot of people just choose to stay.
And do people in your estimation that leave like I guess what we'd call an unhealthy marriage, what does their life look like a few years later typically? Does it get better almost always, or does it get worse a lot of the time, or what does it look like a few years on average?
I think it really depends on the person and the path that they choose. I'm a huge believer in mindset and taking action in the direction that's aligned for us. And I believe in both like attracting what, you know, manifesting, but also at the same time taking action. I think it's a combination, but I think our mindset plays a huge role in it. I think that from what I've seen, and I see men and women at all different stages of divorce, whether they're not sure whether they're even going to get divorced yet, all the way through to I've been divorced for 10 or 15 years. A lot of times they're at a place where they're like, I just really want to find a partner. But online dating is either terrifying for me or awful, right? So but I find that the ones that have had the most success are the ones that are driven and have a core belief that this is the best thing for me, and that, have a mindset of, I'm going to find a way.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I have a list of questions here that I want to ask from the audience.
Yes.
But before we do that, those 9 modules,
Yep.
can you just give a real brief 1 or 2 sentence overview of what those modules are? Like, what's module 1? What's module 2?
Absolutely. So the program itself is called the Love Path program.
Okay.
And it's really a healing program for women who want to attract aligned love into their life, whether it's now or whether they know they are going to want love again one day. It's really to heal yourself in a way so that you're not carrying around this baggage from your divorce for the rest of your life.
Yeah, you can certainly tell when somebody hasn't quite got over it.
The bitterness. And And so the first module, we talk about coming back to self. And really, I think that's something that so many of us, especially if we've had kids and families and all of these things, we can really lose sight of who we are and what we want. And talking about, tuning into self. What does it feel like to be in alignment with my true authentic self? And what does it feel like, and have I ever been confident? Especially if you've gone through a real traumatic divorce, it can shake your confidence, right?
Sure.
So we talk a lot about that in the first module, and we go into the mind-body connection, again, tapping into our intuition, coming back to trust within ourselves. Because as you can imagine, divorce, breakups, if there were lies, if there was, cheating and infidelity, oftentimes we lose that inner trust that we have of ourselves and then also with others. We talk about that. And it goes all the way down into letting go. I have a 4-step blueprint for letting go. So I share that so that they can take action in their own healing, letting go of the things that are holding them stuck in their past. And we talk about boundaries, recognizing red flags, healthy communication in relationships.
Are we still in module 1 or?
No, now we're all the way. And then the last one's called the Beacon for Love.
Okay.
And that's where I talk about the energy of attracting love into your life.
And what's that about?
It's all around, again, coming back to what we did do in module 1, but tapping back into it from a real energetic kind of law of attraction of when I show up as my most aligned and authentic version of myself in my confidence, and I really believe and trust that I deserve the life that I want. And when I know how to show up as that version of myself, I become magnetic.
Sure. Yeah.
And so that it's sort of tapping into that magnetism that we all have and being able to use it to attract a partner that is actually aligned with the version of ourselves that we are now.
So that's interesting because you can usually tell if somebody's single just by looking at them or their energy. It's like you don't really have to ask a lot of the time. And oftentimes you can tell somebody's like, this might get me in trouble, but oftentimes you can tell somebody's like, maybe they're not single, but they're like in a troublesome relationship or something like that. It's like an energy that people kind of put out and you can kind of feel it.
Well, and it's interesting, I was listening to another podcast the other day just about relationships, but they got into this conversation around coming off energetically desperate versus not, and how that even applies to business.
Sure.
And the host was an investor. He does investments in big businesses, and he was saying, it's very similar whether you're talking about relationships or whether I'm talking about business. But if I've got 2 people come to me wanting me to invest in their business, and one makes it feel like I'm an option and they're very confident in what they do, and then the other one, there's an energy that comes off that feels very desperate and like they need it so badly. It's always the one where I feel like an option, where I feel I can sense their confidence and that it's okay if I don't choose them.
Yeah.
That energy is always where I choose to invest in. And it's the same, I believe, in healthy relationships.
Sure. Yeah, right? I think needy people in relationships and in business probably get taken advantage of.
But the relationships also don't work. And I mean, business, it's all about relationships, whether they're romantic or business or otherwise, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But I think I believe when we heal through these processes and really invest into coming back to ourselves and knowing what that feels like, and being in relationships where we're not carrying all this baggage from our past, And we all have it. Like there's no shame. If you've lived any life up till today, we all have a bit of baggage. But it's understanding how long and how much of it we're carrying and how it is shaping the people we're attracting into our lives.
When I picture somebody without any baggage, I picture somebody being happy for some reason.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. But
Well, and I have a total vision of it where I'm putting down, like I'm carrying stuff on my shoulders and I'm able to finally put it down. And then you're just like, it's like an exhale. Like I can finally breathe again and I can stand a little taller. And, and it's interesting because I use that visualization a lot. And I'm like, that baggage doesn't go away. You don't forget it. And it's there, but you don't have to carry it. And it doesn't. And that way you can really focus on showing up as this version of you that you really now want to be, that isn't shaped by your divorce or your past relationship, and you're not carrying the resentment or all the grief and sadness because you've been working through it and processing your emotions in healthy ways now.
Are you saying that you should almost like compartmentalize your baggage? Is that kind of what you're saying?
I think that you have to be able to acknowledge it, if we call it baggage or the thing that is no longer serving us.
Sure.
I think you have to acknowledge it for one. That's the first step. So this is my blueprint for letting go. And then secondly, you have to feel it. So you have to be, and we've never been taught. Like, I mean, some very few lucky ones were raised in a way that we were actually taught how to feel our emotions. But most of us, especially boys, were taught that, don't be a wimp. It's not manly to cry. Toughen up, be a man. And girls were taught, like to be ladylike and don't get angry or too loud or all of these things. So we were actually subconsciously taught how to subdue our feelings and push them down.
Like it's a lot of work to feel feelings.
Yeah.
I don't think I like it, but I know it's a lot of work to feel.
Well,
like
it is. And
emotions.
I think that when we're realizing, okay, like this is actually going to change how my future goes. And if I don't want to carry this with me for the rest of my life, I better start feeling this. And so there are techniques I give clients to like help them feel through it. And then you've got to surrender, because that's, to the things that are no longer in your control. Because if I'm thinking about things that happened in the past and, like 10 years ago when I was married and he did this and he did that or whatever, and I'm still angry about that, I don't have any control over it. Me focusing on it isn't changing it. It's just wasted energy.
Sure.
So when I can acknowledge all that, feel the feelings associated with it, like, because I'm allowed to be angry, but then surrender to it and kind of go, it is what it is, because it happened, it's done. And then it's like I can consciously put it down. I don't need to keep carrying the anger. And then aligned action, where you're stepping into going, okay, now what path am I on and where do I want to go? So I'm going to take an action or change my mindset in the direction of where I'm going, rather than constantly focusing on what happened in my past.
Yeah. I'm curious, in your program, your 9-step program.
Yeah.
Is there a finale or anything? Like I heard somebody that said they went somewhere and like wrote all these things down and burned it, or put a lock on a gate in some foreign country. Is there anything like that you do?
I haven't done an actual ceremony, but we definitely like celebrate each other and how far they've all come through the process and getting to the end. And it really is fascinating. It's why I love what I do so much, is you can see people change. I guess it's more energetically, but it almost seems physical, because it's almost like as the weeks go by, they present differently.
Sure. Yeah, I've witnessed it in people, where you see the burden metaphorically kind of lift a little bit over a period of time. It's usually more than weeks, for what I've noticed. But
yeah, it is really so incredible to watch when you see somebody starting to let go and loosen their grip and kind of get it when it clicks, when they're starting to be like, okay, because you do, what it feels like to me, it's like I actually have the ability to take control of how I move forward, but in a healthy way, right?
Okay.
Like where it's not around control and micromanaging, but it's like I can actually take part in my healing and do these actions and feel differently and learn how to change my mindset and change the way I think. That's actually going to change how my life moves forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
So before we get to these questions, I'd like to ask, like, a few life-changing moments in your life, like where kind of everything changed. It sounds like maybe the divorce with your husband might have been one of those. Was there like a specific point in time where you were kind of like, okay, I made up my mind. It's like, I'm not going to stay married, or was it more of a gradual
He
process?
left me.
Oh,
So for
okay.
me with that, it was it's a very long story, and he's not here to, so I'll say as much as I can without sharing too much.
Sure.
But we went through a year and a half of his cancer together. He still has cancer. He has a form of, it's medullary thyroid cancer, so there's no cure for it. And he's doing wonderful. I'll preface it with that. He's doing fantastic. But at the time, especially the first year and a half of it, it was terrifying because there's a lot of people that actually don't make it with that cancer. And it's just a very unique and rare form of cancer. Long story short, we'd gone through a lot with that. I didn't see it coming at all. He went away for 6 weeks to a healing retreat in Mexico on his own. I was at home with the kids for 6 weeks. We talked every day that he was gone. Everything seemed great. I was so excited for him to come home. And 3 days after he came home, and I could tell something was up, but I genuinely thought it was, he was at this healing retreat. He'd done a lot of deep work on himself. I thought he was just acclimatizing, not really understand. And I didn't want to pry, and I was just letting him work through it. And 3 days after he was home, he ended our marriage.
Oh, 3 days. That's not a lot of time.
So I think without him being here to speak for himself, I think it's safe to say, I think he just really realized, and I think, as much as our whole family experienced cancer, he's the one who has cancer. And I, for that reason, can't put myself entirely in his shoes. But I can imagine that when you're faced with the possibility of life or death and it becomes really real, you really get serious about, am I living the life that I'm supposed to be living? And I can now say, because I'm happily remarried, and I feel like this was all really, truly the right thing, as much as I was deeply, I was devastated at the time. But, and I never thought I'd get to this point of saying it. I really didn't, had you have asked me then. But I do feel like this was the right thing. I feel like both of our lives are exactly how they should be now. But yeah, he just, I think, felt that this wasn't his path and that he needed to really, really follow his heart. And I know it wasn't an easy decision for him, but anyways, he left the marriage very abruptly, and we being myself and the kids, and we share the kids 50-50, and we're very amicable now, and I'm proud of the relationship we've formed, and with my now husband, Justin, and I'm really, really proud of how we do things, because it wasn't easy. And I know from witnessing so many other people that have gone through divorce that it often isn't, I can only take accountability for my half of it, but I'm lucky enough to have an ex that doesn't have his head up his butt, and that we can communicate and make things work, and that we're able to put our kids first, so I'm really grateful for that.
So you were blindsided more or less?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. It was traumatizing. It really was. It was devastating. But now I can see so many wonderful things that happened because of it. And yeah, I'm really, really happy now. So it's good.
Did he just say one sentence, like, I want to get divorced, or was it a big fight and then it happened?
We were actually in therapy, and we had booked a therapy session. So because of his cancer, we'd gone back to therapy with the therapist that we'd had for years. And it was more just, if any of your listeners have gone through cancer, it can put a strain on a relationship, because we all deal with the fear and all the things differently. And so it was important to us to go through therapy while he was dealing with cancer, so that we could stay on the same page. And we had seen the therapist before he left for his 6-week retreat. And he said, well, I'd love to see you guys when you get back. I want to hear how the retreat went, and, let's catch up after you're home again. And so we did that. And I don't know that I even remember it correctly, because of, as soon as he said it, it was like I went in complete shock. But I think the therapist asked me something to speak of my honest truth of how I was feeling about something, and I don't know what I was saying.
Mm-hmm.
But he interrupted, as far as I remember, he interrupted me and just said, I just feel like I need to speak right now because I don't want this marriage anymore. I want to end this marriage. And I remember just, I don't think I said I don't know what I said, but I know that it eventually, the therapist had my ex leave, and then he wanted to make sure I was okay because I wasn't okay. And I don't really remember. I just remember just him trying to like comfort me a bit and just sort of talk me through, and it was devastating.
So from that time to the time that you were feeling more normal again, like a normal person, how long was that? How long did it take to get there?
Gosh, I don't know. I was really lucky, and my circumstances are really unique in that, well, for one thing I did is I started doing Reiki treatments. So I don't know if you're familiar with Reiki, it's an energy work, and I'd never done it. And not too long after that, I was having coffee with my ex, and we were talking about logistics of the divorce and whatnot. And I remember saying, I think I need to do Reiki. Like, it just kind of dropped in. Mm-hmm. And I went and booked several Reiki sessions, and I found my person for Reiki, and I consistently was doing, because it was transformational for me. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the things, because I had a lot of people during that time saying to me, I was also doing therapy and other things, but they kept saying to me, wow, you're so okay. And I remember saying, that's just the Reiki. It's just the Reiki. But how I would go into these sessions, and I think I've been very blessed with a Reiki practitioner that is magical and powerful. Mm-hmm. And she also, it was, probably a combination of some, obviously, energetic healing and getting rid of certain energetic blocks, but also some talk therapy as well interspersed with it and helping me talk through things.
Is that normal for talk therapy to be combined with Reiki? Or?
No, and she would never call it talk therapy, so I don't want to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just think that I call it that. Like we spoke a lot about what I was going through, and she helped. I think it was just a lot of processing it was helping me process. Plus, she's incredibly intuitive. So being able to pick up on maybe some deeper things that I even wasn't aware of. But that, for me, that process really helped in combination with therapy and other things. And then my now husband, Justin, we knew each other. This is a whole nother long story, but we knew each other for over 20 years, like as friends. It was platonic. And he resurfaced, and it was because of me, but it's interesting, and I'll always preface it by saying it was not a booty call. But 3 days after my ex left me, I messaged Justin on Messenger or something, and I just said, hey, this is what happened. I'm devastated. I'm not okay, but my kids are really struggling. Mm-hmm. He's a teacher. And I said to him, I know that your boys were the same age that my boys are when you got divorced. And I'm just curious because this is what's going on with the kids. They're really struggling and I need help. Like, do you have any advice? Mm-hmm. And that was the first message that got sent out, to which he replied, absolutely, I'm so sorry to hear. And then I went radio silent for a while because I was still trying to save my marriage. A few weeks later, he messaged me and said, hey, are you okay? Like, I'm just checking in. I haven't heard from you. He said, I'm hoping that the fact that I haven't heard from you is because things, worked out. Mm-hmm. But if not, let me know if you want to have a call or talk. And I was with a girlfriend, and she, who is that? And we started talking about it, and she just said, phone him or message him. And I said, no, I shouldn't be messaging, even though I knew my intentions were good. It wasn't about, I just said, I just shouldn't be messaging with another guy right now. And she said, Jamie, you deserve to be happy. Yeah. And you're just asking for support. Like I think I was really afraid of judgment of, I don't know, and so anyways, that was the beginning. So we started chatting just on FaceTime, and it led to one day he said, bring the kids to Vernon. Like, your kids need to have some fun. I'll play soccer with them after school. Meet me at the park and you can just chill. And we started doing that because the kids really, they needed it and they enjoyed it. And then it just went from there. But we were engaged within 6 months.
So it does sound like there was a transition there, though. Like, how long did it take you from the time your ex-husband was like, we're getting a divorce, to give up all hope and you're like, I'm done? It must not have been that long.
Well, I mean, there's so many layers in there, and there's parts of the story that it's not mine to share, but there
Sure.
was a moment where there was a statement that was said to me that made me realize that there was nothing that I could do. That no matter what I did or said, he wasn't changing his mind.
Sure.
And there was a moment of surrender in that. I can remember it very clearly in the kitchen where I just went, okay, because I had kept asking, like, why? Like, why are you doing this? Why? And he had never up till that point really given me a clear answer. And in that moment, what he said to me was, it just was very clear that if that is what he believed and that was his reason, that no amount of begging or pleading or trying to like talk sense into him was going to change anything. And there was a surrender that happened then. Everything that happened moving forward with Justin, honestly, was, I had no plan of that happening, and it actually terrified me, but it's turned out to be the biggest blessing I think I've ever received in my life.
Sounds like it.
Because I think that's the other part of it, is where I was really lucky is I had this support that so many people don't have, because he allowed me to cry and to grieve and to talk about it. It wasn't that we just dove into a relationship where I just cut off and wasn't. And I actually had said to him, if at a certain point I had said, I can't continue on unless I'm allowed to grieve, because I'm not okay. And if I don't grieve, I'm going to be dealing with this for the rest of my life. And he had the courage and the strength, because it takes a strong person to be able to watch somebody that you love cry over another relationship, right? And so there was this duality between like the grief, but also the excitement and the happiness that was happening. And I am sure there was so many people on the outside that thought it was a major,
Be a whirlwind of
like
emotions.
a rebound relationship. But we're still together. We've been married 5 years now.
Oh. Do you remember what the advice was for the kids or not? When you ask him about advice for your kids?
I think he just really believed they needed to just be happy and to have some like kid stuff happening. And the toughest part for me was that I was struggling with it, and struggling, like I was doing the best that I could. I was very cognizant of not wanting to. I didn't hide. I don't believe you should hide your emotions, but at the same time, I didn't want them to be surrounded just by sadness and grief, right? I think that could be so scary for kids. But at the same time, it was very clear they needed to have some fun and just, be kids.
Be kids. So we talked about that was a fairly traumatic experience, I could tell. What was there one experience where you're like, you know what, I want to be like a life coach or get into counseling or something, or was that more of a gradual process?
Like I said, it was something I had thought about since I was at university back in the 90s.
And in university, was there ever something that happened where you're like, oh, I kind of like this?
It's the truth of it is I went to UVic wanting to work with dolphins, which makes me laugh. So I went into science I'm going to go into marine biology, and figured out I did sciences through my whole degree. But my first year, I realized I hated biology. And I dove into psychology after that, because with my second year, I'm like, well, if I don't like biology and that's not the direction I'm going, what do I like? Which was instantly psychology.
Sure.
And so that is what I did my major in. And that was where my interest was at the time. But I also had this other side of me that was interested in health and nutrition and well-being, which again led me down the massage path. But originally, like, it really was the interest in psychology and studying humans and why we are the way we are.
Okay. Well, we did reach out to our community, and we got some questions, and we're a business community, but we didn't get many questions about business.
That's
so we're
okay.
having to take a little detour here. So the first question is, what is the best divorce prevention strategy? I think you already answered that with the talk thing, though.
I think it's communication and getting the skills you need to have healthy conflict. You know, being able to, which really revolves around healthy communication, and being able to, like, I think when we talk about communication, people automatically assume communication is speaking. The most important part of communication is active listening.
Yeah.
Right? Because think about how you feel when you feel heard, like really heard. So it's choosing, and I'll say this because it's an important one, is when you go into any conversation, be really aware and grounded before you go in, choosing to want to understand the other person more and letting go of the need to be understood.
Sure.
If you can do that successfully, because that's, as soon as you want to understand someone more, you're listening because you want to understand them. You want to hear how they feel. You ask the questions that are going to clarify that. They feel heard. And when someone feels heard and validated, they relax.
Sure.
Right? And 99% of the time, I would say, they'll usually, in a healthy relationship, they then reflexively want to know how you feel. So they'll usually return the favor, right?
Yeah, that's powerful. Okay. Number 2 was actually, with that one, I forget who said it, but they said, make sure you understand the other person, but it's not up to you to understand, to know when you understood them. Repeat what you think they said until they're like, okay, yeah, you get it, right? Like, you
It's
can,
reflective speaking.
Yeah, you're kind of like, okay, I understand to the point where I can repeat it back to you without you needing to clarify anything.
It's where you use statements, and it also sounds very forced, but if you're noticing the conversation starting to get a little intense, to start going, what I'm hearing you say is, and then you say what you thought you heard, and then the other person has the opportunity to go like, no, that's not what I said. What I said was, and then they can say it again, or yes, that's what I said. So when it slows down the conversation, and it's making sure that what you actually said was actually heard by your partner. So you're really getting it, because it's interesting how much our brains change what we hear. What we think we heard isn't always 100% what was said. Which is, again, it's how our minds, it's, you know, the psychology of what we're already thinking. We have a filter over it, right?
Words are like sometimes inefficient at conveying emotions.
Yeah.
Okay, more than a year has gone by for this listener, and she says, we're still not broken up. What should I do? I don't know if you can answer that one or not, but like, what happens in a case where somebody's like, they've been in this relationship that's kind of been on the tipping point for like multiple years? What do you do in a situation like that?
That's something I hear a lot. It's like the cycle, right? The breaking up and getting back together cycle. And when you think about it, it really does come down to fear. Oftentimes it's the fear of being alone. And so often it's like you'll break up because you know that that's what's best. But they'll get back together because they get lonely, things get uncomfortable. And as humans, we are like hardwired to hate discomfort. We start, you know, all the like big scary things start coming up for us, and we go back to what's comfortable. It may not be healthy, it may not be good, but it's comfortable and it's what we're used to. So I would say to that listener that if it has become a cycle, that you have to take action and really choose to lean into the uncomfortable and break up. If it sounds like, especially if it's a cycle, chances are if it's not working, it's not working. If you've tried enough, like, take a break, and really when it does start getting uncomfortable, you've got to create new boundaries. You've got to be willing to stay uncomfortable, try new things, build your confidence, and invest in yourself in, you know, figuring out where the insecurities lie in you that's making you want to constantly go back to this same person.
Sure. Yeah, I heard somebody say change is always on the other side of your comfort zone or something like that.
Absolutely.
So, who has it harder in a divorce, men or women?
I think it depends. I think it depends on who's got their head further up their butt. But I mean, honestly, because I've seen some horror stories, and it really is, my hat goes off to what some people actually have to go through with navigating really tough divorces, where there's two people that are really at odds with each other. And I think that harder, neither for men or women. It's just if you're with somebody who can't, I don't know if the word's negotiate or, find a common solution. I think, how I like to look at it is you're ending one relationship and you're creating another one, especially if you have kids. And it's not a romantic relationship, but now it's a relationship as a divorced couple or co-parents. How do you want that relationship to look? Do you, like, in 10 years from now, how do you want it to look? Like, what would be the perfect case scenario? Show up in a way that's aligned with that goal, right? And so the hardest part of that, though, is as much as you can try and communicate, but you can't control the other person. And sometimes it's really where you have to leave it with the lawyers and allow there to be some mediation that maybe isn't directly between the two of you. But it is tough. I can't say that it's more difficult for men or women. It really is case specific.
Okay.
Yeah.
The next question is from me.
Yeah.
Was when your ex-husband went on the trip to Mexico, was that like ibogaine or ayahuasca? Like, I've been looking at this Jamaica thing where it's like you go on this ayahuasca thing and it's like a midlife crisis type deal and all that. Like, was it any of that kind of stuff, or do you have opinion on any of that stuff?
Yeah, I don't have an opinion. I think if that's something that appeals to you and you're feeling really drawn to it, there's a reason, and maybe like investigate it and really understand it. I don't think go on a whim, but it's funny you ask, because what he did, I call it a healing retreat. When he went, it was a friend of his mom's. His mom used to live in Mexico. She's since passed away, but his mom used to live in Mexico, and she knew somebody who knew somebody that had this healing modalities retreat that could cure cancer.
Oh, okay.
And he felt his mother was going to pay for it, and he felt called to do it. Anytime I had asked about it, he didn't have a lot of information. What I do know is while he was down there, a lot of this healing retreat was a lot of actual, like, I think, infusion treatments and health, like diet stuff and nutrition, as well as like cold dips and things like that. There also was, and I don't know if this was part or added on to, but there was different ceremonies with shamans and some DMT, which is a derivative of ayahuasca.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, it's hallucinogenic, but again, it brings up, like, really, it can for some people. I've heard other people who say they have really transformative journeys. He did it several times while he was down there, and I think it was transformative for him. I think too, I didn't ask a whole lot of details after he came back, which I would have otherwise had we have still been together, but it was obviously very triggering for me.
Sure.
And I wasn't quite sure how I felt about it at the time.
Yeah, those therapies seem like they're starting to be a little bit more mainstream these days.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I see it happening, whether it be mushroom journeys or ayahuasca or DMT and what's the other one? But there's several of them now, and I think they can have really transformative, especially like there is medical journeys you can do and different things. I don't know enough about it, but I'm open to anything if it feels aligned for that person, right?
Yeah, I heard the other day that ibogaine is like curing addictions with like a 90% success rate or something.
Wow.
So I don't know how true that is, but I watched a little thing on that.
Yeah.
Okay, prenups. What's your opinion on prenups?
Prenups, it's funny. I think, honestly, I think that whether or not you get a prenup or not, I think the conversation's what's really important. It comes back to communication and making sure you're on the same page openly and honestly. I know that when it comes to especially people of a certain age, and we're talking about whether there's, estates that may be handed down through families, or that there's like one partner that has maybe more money accumulated than another, it's a conversation that needs to be had, because it's important and it matters. And the reality is, as we know, if 50% of marriages are ending, you need to, it's all fine and good to believe your marriage won't be the 50% that won't last.
There was a podcast divorce lawyer in New York, and he said that the most interesting thing he found with prenups is the ones that have the communication skills to negotiate a prenup are more likely to stay married than the people that don't have the skills to negotiate a prenup.
I would 100% agree with that. I think, and that's part of it. I think if you're willing in a relationship to have the hard conversations, and money is extremely hard. It's a really sore subject for a lot of relationships, right? It comes down to money and sex that people fight about, right? And I think that if you can be on the same page financially and have an agreement that you both feel comfortable with and be willing to have that conversation, chances are you can probably have hard conversations about anything.
Okay. So tips for divorce when you know you're going to get divorced and you're going through it, what are the tips for divorce?
Like I said, I really believe in, and this is something that I thought about a lot as I moved through, is how do I want to show up so I can feel proud? It was very much on the forefront of my mind, is I want to feel proud, whether it's a year, 5 years, 10 years from now. I want to look back on this and be like, wow, even though it was really hard, I showed up. Like I did that well, whether it be for my kids, myself, or for this new co-parenting relationship we had. And that's something I share a lot with people, is to help them shift their mindset, because it can be very easy to get caught up in blaming but he or she is doing this. It's always but, right? And it's not that that isn't wrong, but what about this is within your control?
Okay.
It's the recognition that we can't control somebody else. We can communicate, but we can't control. And so coming back to owning your own behavior, doing your own healing, and showing up in a way that you can feel really proud of as you move forward.
Sure. Okay. And then lastly, it seems like you're an entrepreneur, that you started a business that you're passionate about, that you love your day to day. You know, you created a business around what you wanted to do. We have a lot of people here that want to start businesses. They're entrepreneurs at heart, but they haven't started yet. Or what advice do you have to those people?
Oh my gosh. My advice is messy action. It's go for it. I started and I was terrified. I can remember the first time I showed up on a story on Instagram. Like, if I don't even know if you can get back into the archives that far. I was terrified, and I don't even remember what I was talking about at the time. And that was just it, is my path from 7 years ago to today was like super not linear. And where I started is not where I ended up. You know, I started thinking I was going to do relationship coaching, and I ended up working specifically primarily with women, doing divorce coaching and helping them to attract new love into their lives. And that, it just feels so right, but I had to start. And I also think that, you know, the difference between anyone, I was telling my 11-year-old son the other day who wants to start a business, I said, you need to find people that have done what you want to do, or that have what you want to have, and start talking to them and talking to other people that have it, and seeing what the common factors are, and learning the habits and the discipline that these people have to get to what, you know, what they've achieved. And so finding people who have already walked that path and learning from them, like, you know, what is it that what would you recommend, and asking. And for me, like right now, it's just start and learn as you go, be willing to fail. You got to leave your ego at the door. And that's the thing, you've got to be willing. I always think of Sarah Blakely from Spanx, who's a multi-billionaire, right? She tells a story about her father at the dinner table always celebrated their failures, and he actually got upset with them, I believe is the story, if they didn't, you know, after the day at school that they'd have, how did you fail today? And if they didn't have something, that would bother him, because he believed that if you didn't fail at something, then you weren't trying something hard.
Sure. I always do that with my kids.
Right. And I think that that's such a gift, like, because, you know, I think for anyone starting, I told myself, this is what I want. Like, I have a big dream, and I'm never giving up. I don't care how bad it gets. I'm not giving up. And I'm telling you, I have failed, like whether it's failed launches, like just so many failures behind the scenes, over and over again, but I just keep going.
Sure.
And I think that that's for all of us. I think the ones that actually end up having success are the ones that just never stopped.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's that they never failed.
Yeah, I like what you told your son. So kind of success leaves clues.
Yeah.
But I like even more just take messy action, because that's
Right?
essentially what it is. Just
It
take
doesn't have to
messy
be
action.
perfect.
Yeah.
Plus, I actually think that, you know, people really are attracted to authenticity. They want to see something that's real.
Yeah.
Perfection's not real.
Sure. Yeah. Not even close.
Right?
Like messy action is probably as real
Yeah.
as it gets. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, Jamie.
Jamie,
Sorry, not
it's
Jenny.
okay.
I don't know if I got your last name. Jamie
Morgan.
So plug yourself. Tell people where they can find you if they're interested in like taking your program or
Yeah.
anything like that.
You can find me, I'm most often on Instagram at
Okay.
the Jaime Morgan. And then my website's jamiemorgan.com. And you can always click the link in my bio on Instagram, and I've got free quiz where you can find out what your love barriers are, what your specific love personality is, and then I'm going to send you a free guide that's going to show you what your magic is in terms of love, like depending on what your unique love personality is, like why you're destined for love, but also maybe what your challenges are. And then I give you tools and action steps that you can start taking today that can change the trajectory of how you move forward in relationships. So that's one easy place to start that's free and just sort of check out how it feels. I also have a free, it's called the Beacon for Love Masterclass. It's a 4-day online masterclass coming up in October. You can join it on Instagram, but also on my website. And yeah, October 22nd to 25th, we'll be going live with that one. So there's a few ways.
All right. Jaime Morgan, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.